Hey guys, I'm Brent.
I'm Lila, and you can find us on the web at www.braintrustlive.com.
That is right.
I'm
Uh,
podcasting to you from the Arctic,
and I'm back
where
in my house. Listen, guys, if you are watching us on YouTube, which you're not, but if you are, we're really keeping you on our toes with where we are right now.
I'm in a different location. I'm in a different undisclosed location
Right. And
every
I've moved back to
week.
my home. I've been at Lila's house. I've been
Right.
all those.
Brent lives part-time at my house now, so
Yeah.
that's, that's
Um,
where he does all of his business.
uh, but
Where
I'll
he
tell you where
conducts
we
all of his
wouldn't
business.
be. Even if we were both in Los Angeles, we would not be recording this podcast together because that would officially be illegal.
That's right. We're from two different households,
That's right.
and that's no longer allowed as of what, Monday? Well, the thing
Oh
that
yeah, we could. Today could have been our last
Today
one.
could have been our last one. The thing that they keep doing with the LA rules is they keep suggesting that COVID will finally start on Monday. It's like they're always
Yeah.
like, as of 3 days from now,
Right.
we're going to ban a thing that anyone could stop doing right now, but we're going to give you 3 days to get COVID with each other first, and then you won't be able to see your friends.
Yeah, and they also keep doing it in a way that like I understand politically because they're trying to like not have like every single living constituent pissed off at them, but they keep doing them like around like my boyfriend kept saying, he was like, it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen, they're gonna do it ASAP, even though the numbers like had been like inching up for a while. He was like, they have to do it because they have to get done, but they have to get it done before Christmas.
Right. Oh yeah.
And they waited until after Thanksgiving to do it. So it's like they talk about how they're like concerned about all of these Thanksgiving is going to be a super spreader event, but they're like, go ahead and have Thanksgiving, and then we'll put a 3-week order in, which will be done on December 20th, and then you'll be good and then COVID will be gone before Christmas.
Yeah,
but also don't go to Christmas with your family either. Like it sort of like goes back to what you have been harping on for months, that it's just sort of like they're trying to have it both ways here. They're trying to like get you to do everything that they think that you should do, but they're not actually, they're giving you, mixed messages about it. They are also like not enforcing anything. Like
and none
on
of them
some level, I
would
be happy if I went to someone's home right now and like someone gave me a ticket. That I would feel good about that. I mean, I'm not going to be going to anyone's home right now, but like at least
even
then
when it happens, they're never going to actually be giving you any sort of ticket for this. It's like the fine for breaking quarantine in New York City is $10,000, but they have not levied it on anyone.
I know.
So it's like, I don't know who's in charge of the $10,000 collections.
Right. Well, and there was a lot of blowback from Minnesota because they just put into a similar, thing, stay-at-home order, and like everybody was immediately like enraged about it. And then the governor was like, well, we're not going to be coming into your homes to write you tickets for this. And it's like, okay, well, great.
Right. Give up the whole game. Well, that's also a lot of them, like, I think it was the mayor of Denver or somewhere, told everyone to stay home for Thanksgiving and then went to like,
he went to Mississippi or something.
Mississippi. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And Gavin Newsom is, dining with his lobbyist friends.
Like, right. The entire state government of California had a retreat in Hawaii.
In Hawaii. Right.
I don't know how anyone is supposed to be taking any of these rules seriously when none of the people making the rules seem to have to follow them. Yeah. And this is one example of a time where public officials following their own rules would really come in handy.
It would.
Like, this is the one time, like, I know they don't follow the rules normally. I know that, their friends don't have to go through the long immigration process that everyone else has to go through. And their friends probably, can have a government contract without having to go through all of the vetting processes or competition that is supposed to happen. And, like, they can violate ethics laws. They can do all these things. And I get that that's how they live. But this is one time where their behavior is like really under the microscope and actually kind of like crucial to protecting public health. Yeah. And they're still failing that test.
I know. Yeah. But anyway, it's crazy. Like, use your brains out there also, because this is another thing that like I have thought, because like, I think the city government or the county government, I suppose it is really trying to like, again, have it both ways where they're like not actually shutting everything down. So like they're like telling some businesses that they can offer or that they can operate at something like 30 or 35% capacity or something like that. So like if you were sitting at home and you're thinking about going to a business that is obviously troubling enough that they can only have a third of the people that would normally be there in the first place, like a salon or something like that, use your dumb head and
Right.
don't be going to those places.
Well,
Because
it's like one place that people of multiple households can meet and interact legally is a nail salon for whatever reason, where they literally touch your hands. But
yeah.
you like don't you don't need to go to the Gap this week.
No, you don't go there.
Don't do they're having Black Friday sales on the internet. I know we are mad at Amazon, but it's like let's not worry, let's not ruin our own personal health in order to stick it to Amazon. That's the government could be sticking it to Amazon. We have other recourse with Amazon, or we have no recourse with Amazon, so let's not even worry about it. Right. We're in a terrible situation. Jeff Bezos owns more wealth than all of us combined, and if that's the case, I don't see why I should get COVID just to stick it to him. He doesn't care. Just in any case, LA has been having one of the worst surges that it has had of late. Also, though, everywhere is surging, including, 10% of South Dakota has now had coronavirus. Like, there are counties where 15-20% of people in, like, especially in the upper Midwest, there are a bunch of counties where, like, the rates are astronomical.
Oh, I talked to my
reversal of how it was at the beginning, because right now the lowest rates are places like Seattle, San Francisco, New York City. The outbreaks that they're having there are so much smaller than what they're experiencing per capita in the Midwest.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Well, that's what I actually I spoke with my cousin on Thanksgiving, who's a school administrator in Iowa. And she said that their county positivity rate is 30%. And they had already gone recently to, learning from home. But she had still been working in the administrative office, but that administrative office is now closing because she's one of only like 4 or 5 people in the entire office who have not had COVID yet.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
And this is also like, if you are somebody who like doesn't think this affects you because you are not going to get COVID, like this affects you because you might get something else and the hospital might not be able to treat you.
Yeah.
So
just
like, and especially in some of these like rural counties, like I don't know what people are supposed to do. There's no healthcare in rural America.
Right.
If the Democrats wanted to organize and win rural America, they would run on they would run on a system that is government healthcare, but expands healthcare into rural America.
Yeah.
Because
and guess what? We've had a candidate run on that before.
Right. And it worked.
By the way.
So
his name was Bernie Sanders. And people wrote
right. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Anyway.
New York, meanwhile, got pressured into reopening their schools because they refused to close their restaurants. So everybody was like, why are our kids less important than eating out? And so instead of closing both, they just reopened the schools.
And like, I understand like that rage. Like,
absolutely.
That makes sense to me. Like,
no,
yes,
if
you're
anyone
right.
should be able to be with people, it's kids.
Right. The answer was close the restaurants.
That was the answer. The answer also is to like provide some sort of meaningful assistance to the restaurants so that they don't have to stay open. Because the whole restaurants want to stay open is not because they love spreading coronavirus. It's because people can't afford to like eat otherwise.
Well, and that's the problem, because obviously, the state and local governments aren't getting any assistance from the federal government, and the federal government went home for Thanksgiving without doing a lick of anything. So I can understand why New York City felt like the right answer was to send the schools back, because they probably did feel like they had to leave the restaurants open or else the restaurants were going to close, and they were not going to do anything to help the restaurants because they're broke.
We have all just been left in like the shittiest possible situation where we're all, and it's like the amount of worse it's going to get over the next 2 weeks is going to be staggering because I feel like the number of large Thanksgivings that were witnessed just by me to people on the internet were, and the amount of holiday travel that went on, and the amount, you can't actually reasonably expect that you can stop people from traveling over the holidays and seeing their families. So what you have to do is have a public health plan that takes those actions into account. Like, that is what I'm always saying about, like, you can be mad at your individual uncle for not wearing a mask, but you can't be mad at 50% of Americans for acting like fools if you're not also going to be mad at the government that didn't know they were going to act like fools, when that is literally what people are always doing.
Right.
Your whole job as a public health official is to be like, okay, people are going to act a fool. Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And then making decisions on the basis of that assumption. And instead, we're just like, Donald Trump's still telling us the problem's going to go away.
Right.
It's apparently, don't worry, guys. It's coronavirus is going away. He's mad this week because he wants credit for the vaccines, and now he's worried that they'll happen under the Biden administration. In any case, before we get into that, we promised the return of Sinkhole Radio. And there was the most adorable sinkhole in New York City this week. Brought
Nobody got hurt.
Nobody got hurt. Only a car got hurt. Brought to
Uh-huh.
us care of Lauren Leader, friend of the podcast, because that is who initially told me about this. It was
Uh-huh.
on Thanksgiving Day. An SUV in Queens, a RAV4, got swallowed by this cute little sinkhole in a parking spot in Queens, and the sinkhole is just big enough for the car, and it's so cute.
Yeah, it was a Thanksgiving sinkhole miracle.
It's a Thanksgiving sinkhole miracle. Better than the sinkhole that we didn't report on, where a guy fell, I think it was in the Bronx or something. A guy fell through like the sidewalk and literally ended up covered in rats. Like
What a horror
was
show.
a horrifying story.
Oh, you saw the
He was
rat,
okay.
didn't you? When you were in New York.
I saw the rat. Yeah,
Yeah,
the human rat.
The human rat. Yeah.
Not the union rat. The rat, the pizza rat. The man dressed as the pizza
The
rat.
man pizza rat. Right. Yeah.
The man pizza rat who's been hanging out in the subways / on the internet. I saw him in real life with my real eyes. It was the most exciting thing that's happened to me in months. In any case, so we finally got to the point where the government has acknowledged the winner of its own election and decided that instead of having randos offer donations to transition from one horrible president to what could be another horrible president, but less horrible, they were going to put through the paperwork that gives the Biden campaign access to the transition funds. And this is great for anyone except the people who donated to the Biden transition fund, because those people deserve a refund. And B,
I'm gonna need a minute because I have just been silently like giggling to myself over here through this entire rant, and that's also what caused me to cough right there. So I'm sorry about that, but that was inspired, by the way.
It's not a COVID cough.
That's all fine. Could be. I mean, who knows?
It was a life cough. In any case, we had said that the Biden team was locked out of their transition funds, and they stupidly went to the internet to try to get those funds, even though the answer is to call up the bankers that you know and be like, give me a loan, because the money is coming. We just don't have it yet.
Yeah.
You don't take donations for a thing that you're eventually going to get paid for. But whatever, maybe I don't understand how philanthropy works. In any case, they finally got, the GSA finally got the go ahead. That being Emily Murphy, the head of the GSA, who was a Trump appointee, finally got the go ahead from Trump, who then she released a letter in doing this to say that she was going to do it, which is like the snarkiest letter, where she's mad that people have been angry at her and she's annoyed that people have been harassing her. And it's like, well, you were like holding up the like transition of power for reasons that were not legitimate.
Right, because she was saying, I think the entire time, and even people within the administration were saying that Trump had not, now, whether we believe this or not, but like they were saying that Trump had not ordered her to do this.
Right, that she was just waiting until the court cases, all of which have been laughed out of every court. Right. Like the last 20 days is just like a nonstop marathon of people laughing at various Donald Trump Trump lawyers in various courts around America. I mean, none of these cases have had any merit, and everyone knew it. So like you don't hold up the transition funds, especially in the middle of a huge international crisis, that being the pandemic.
Right. Well, and that's what the Biden officials who are working on the transition were saying, that that's obviously the most urgent need, like more so than any other transition, which you still need to do orderly. Like we're in the midst of this thing that like is obviously taking like mass planning, that the baton needs to be passed off on that.
Right. Although I would contend that the Trump administration has done nothing. So I don't know what baton needs to, like, I don't know what information they don't have access to that the Trump administration has been collecting in all of their infinite wisdom. So who can know? But Trump also did his first interview after his loss. You know, he's been MIA for a while, / playing golf / hiding from everyone / anger tweeting in ways that suggest that he does know he lost the election, but just won't admit it to himself or anyone, which is classic Trump.
Right.
Because this is how he gets away with everything, is he just pretends things aren't happening.
Well, and that day, the GSA, also, can we just say, this is one more thing that like, now we're worried about the GSA. Nobody's ever heard of the GSA before. This, like, add this to the list of things that like we've had to learn and care about in the Trump era of the presidency, because it's like, nobody, like, I want to go back to a world where I don't know what the GSA is. Like, you know, I still obviously want to and will be actively paying attention to everything that the Biden administration is up to. But like, you know, it would be my hope.
With some exceptions.
With some exceptions. And this would be one of them. Like, don't make me know about who Emily Murphy is.
No,
I just
I don't want to know
I-
anything about the administrative side of the government at all.
No.
I care about policy. I care about voting and elections. I
Right.
do
I don't
not
care about general services or whatever the fuck.
I don't care about what the GSA is up to. I don't care. I mean, I only care about what the GAO is up to insofar as I want to make sure that people aren't committing various ethics violations, but like I don't also want to hear about their everyday business there.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear about the printing offices in any government bill. I mean, there's so many parts of the government that I don't want to hear about and
Right.
have no interest in.
Right. That we've had to.
And the GSA is sort of the ultimate example. It's like
peak that.
It's peak that. It's the
Yeah.
least interesting government agency on the planet.
Yeah.
In any case.
Anyway, so Trump did tweet about that and acknowledge that, you know, the GSA was moving forward with the transition, but, you know, he also said our case strongly continues. We'll keep up the good fight. I believe that we will prevail. So he still basically like acknowledged that like there was going to be a transition, but also was like, I was cheated out of the election. So a lot of Republicans seem to think that that was probably the closest thing to a concession that we're actually going to get.
I can't believe that I am still shocked by his random capitalizations today. It never ceases to amaze me. Every single time I'm like, he certainly has learned to write in the English language, but he hasn't. No. Every single time I read a tweet of his, I'm re-shocked to discover that random words are capitalized willy-nilly. Country is capitalized.
Yeah.
It's like, what is, and he loves an all caps word. Strongly is all caps.
I love.
But I just like, I feel like.
I also love that. And all caps text is a big part of my texting.
Well, you got to do it. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like Donald Trump would be a kind of fascinating text friend because you would get a lot of Looney Tunes weird rants.
Oh, no, that would be fun.
But you would get, but it's like, it's harder to capitalize something than not, which says to me that he is carefully going over these and just like going out of his way to make additional unnecessary punctuation changes and other, you know, alphabet changes.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what he's doing. Yeah.
I mean, that's wild.
Yeah.
In any case, he also went on Fox. He appeared in real life.
Yeah, I think the people who say that that tweet is the closest thing that we're ever going to get to a concession are probably right, because if they said that, they were certainly vindicated by this interview he did with Maria Bartiromo on Fox.
It was less of an interview and more of just like an experience.
Yeah, it was like basically just, you know, him, it was an airing of grievances.
It was an airing of grievances.
Right?
Yeah. He's also working on a new conspiracy theory about voting machines.
Well, this is the similar theory that, you know, what's her name was, you know, Sydney.
Right. We've heard it before from Sidney Powell.
Right. And it was too crazy at the time for even Trump himself, because they parted ways with her as part of their legal team. But clearly he's just taken up the mantle on her behalf after he fired her.
He's very suggestible. If you say something to him, even if it's lunacy and no one in their right minds would believe you, he might in that moment see other people reacting and be like, yeah, I don't agree with you either. But then like a day later, it will like marinate and then he'll start saying it. Like, it's so easy to get him to say things. I don't know why we didn't use that to our advantage more. Yeah. I've been saying for years that this is the way to his heart, is to just say things that don't make any sense to him and he'll repeat them eventually.
Yeah.
He loved Obamacare for that day because he's spoken to Obama. Like, you need to actually speak to him so that he'll repeat what you want him to repeat. But he's very suggestible. If you can inception him with no problem.
Yeah.
And Brent and I are experts in that because we did once inception somebody.
We sure did.
And that was a glorious moment in the history of inceptioning. And so we would know who is and is not suggestible. In any case, there is a company called Dominion Voting Systems that, and like, what's so wild about this is that complaining about voting machines used to belong to the left wing. Like, we were thinking about voting machines because electronic voting machines with no paper trail were a big source of controversy for many years. Right. And somehow Trump has like flipped the script on voting machine anger, because now we're here celebrating LA County's glorious voting machine changes. And Donald Trump is like ranting on Fox News about Dominion voting systems.
Yeah, it's wild. But he has so many crazy conspiracy theories. Like,
well, one of them is not a conspiracy theory so much as like a full misunderstanding of how counting works.
Oh, this is my favorite. Listen, he doesn't know why all of the late mail-in ballots, the dumps, as he calls them, we'll read the whole quote in a second. He doesn't understand how, at first I was just sort of like, oh, he is just sort of like giving like whatever the line is on this, where he's just sort of like, oh no, all of these late votes like were found and like they're illegal, and like I thought he was just sort of like making up kind of a conspiracy theory it as to why all of the, it took 2 days for him to lose, basically, right? Like he's just making up some cockamamie excuse or whatever. But I remain steadfast in my belief that he just doesn't actually have the mental capabilities to understand why everything was not counted the night of and why the votes that came in late were not for him.
Which is wild, because
I don't think that he gets it.
If he wasn't so busy boycotting CNN, they spent 3 days explaining that on television 24 hours a day. It was literally all anyone talked about for days.
Yeah, because let's read this quote from this interview. He said, "This election was over, and then they did dumps. They call them dumps, big, massive dumps in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and all over. If you just take a look at about every state that we're talking about, every swing state that we're talking about, and they did these massive dumps of votes. And all of a sudden, I went from winning by a lot to losing by a little. And in some cases, it took a period of time to do it."
Which is so typical of counting, because counting is not completed until you're done. Every single time that you sit down to count something, you aren't done counting that thing until you have finished. Which is, I think, something that even kindergartners understand about counting, and yet Donald Trump having difficulty with this. And the other thing that I think is so hilarious is one of his favorite talking points is that he couldn't have possibly lost because 74 million or 75 million people voted for him. And then when it gets raised, as it often does, that Joe Biden has now gotten 80 million votes, he's like, well, that's not real. He couldn't have possibly gotten 80 million votes. How would he have done that?
Right.
Which is like the same way that you got 75 million votes by having people vote for him. Like, this is not rocket science.
We're equally as horrified that you got that many votes.
Right. I mean, everybody is surprised by that.
But trust us, I'm
not surprised that more people voted for Joe Biden. More people voted for Hillary Clinton. It's not surprising when someone gets more votes than you, nor is it suspicious, because it's literally happened every time. I think he's more confused that Joe Biden got more votes for him than him and like got to win.
I do think that that's it. I think this all really goes back to, his ego, which should be of no surprise because he's a narcissist, and we know that. But I do think that this is all the rage over this is in part because he lost, certainly, but it's in large part because he lost to Joe Biden, who he has been calling the worst candidate for president since the beginning of time. And listen, he's not
Stop
not
clock
wrong.
Is right twice a day.
So, I mean, this is a man, Joe Biden, who won by mostly, taking cover in his own home. And so I get it. Like, you can see why he would be upset by that. But like, that also is still the world in which we're living in. Like, I don't know what to tell it.
Is it embarrassing to lose by 5 million votes to Joe Biden? Sure. Yeah, that's embarrassing. That doesn't mean it's not true.
Right, exactly.
But if that is something that he has correctly identified, that's a pretty embarrassing outcome for him.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that he does that other people don't do is his next conclusion after that is, well, then I must not have won.
Yeah. He also thinks maybe the FBI is out to get him, which is
and the Department of Justice, which he runs.
Right. Which is not new for him because, he's been talking about the deep state since before he got elected. But he even brought up James Comey in this interview. He talked about the Durham report, which was that whole thing where he felt like, his Spygate allegations about the Obama administration were going to happen. Like he continued his grievances over that, never materializing into anything, and blamed the FBI for that. But then also claimed that the FBI is looking into Dominion.
Right, the voting machine company, but also that was part of the same crackpot theory that Sidney Powell had, and that was the one that involved Hugo Chavez and George Soros and the communists in China and everyone.
Oh, he's also mad he's also furious at Brian Kemp in Georgia, which hilariously he said the governor's done nothing. He's done absolutely nothing. I'm ashamed that I endorsed him, as if like he was supposed to have done something, but I guess he was, because remember Lindsey Graham went and tried to get Brian Kemp to do something. So,
well, one thing that he did, which was an action that he took, was certifying the election. What he didn't do was nothing, which was not certifying the election, which is what Donald Trump is accusing him of. The governor has done something. It's the only thing possibly that Brian Kemp has done other than steal the election himself, but it is something that was done by Brian Kemp. So at least we have that.
Yeah.
He also thinks that the fact that the courts aren't taking him seriously is like a conspiracy of some sort.
Right.
Like the fact they keep saying he went on this. I'm going to just read the quote because the quote's insane and it's funny.
It's great.
We have stories that are unbelievable, but we're not allowed to put in our proof. They say you don't have standing. I said I'd like to file to the lawyers, whatever that means. I would like to file one nice, big, beautiful lawsuit. They say, sir, you don't have standing. I say, I don't have standing. You mean as president of the United States, I don't have standing? What kind of a court system is this? And the judges stay away from it. I mean, it's
one nice, big, beautiful lawsuit is all he wants. That's it.
Beautiful,
just
large,
one big, beautiful lawsuit.
A larger than average and more attractive than average lawsuit.
Yeah, a 10.
A 10, perfect 10 lawsuit. And they keep telling him he doesn't have standing. And how is the president? Could he not have standing, Brent? How is that even possible?
I don't know.
Is it because the court system is not, / at least should not be designed specifically to work at the whim of the president?
I mean, that might be a large part of it.
Although, buckle up, because one whim that they're working right now is that they are going to allow churches to stay open no matter what, this happens with the pandemic.
I know, Supreme Court
ruled on that this week, and that's highly suspect.
Yeah.
So in that sense, he does feel rightfully that he has some ownership over the courts because they're echoing all of his crackpot insane ideas. But this yearning for a big beautiful lawsuit is a conspiracy. Obviously, it's part of the conspiracy of the courts, where he's appointed almost every judge at this point, not wanting to hand him an election that he didn't win. And how could that be fair? How could that be fair?
Yeah.
And I said early on that he would never concede, and everyone was like, maybe he'll concede. I think everyone keeps holding out hope for him to do things that he's definitely not going to do these things.
No, he's not doing that.
He's not going to concede. He doesn't act like this. Like, he doesn't act like a regular person. Like all of the times that everyone has been holding out hope that he would act like a minor adult have always been crushing disappointments. You don't have to be disappointed that he doesn't concede. You can just know in your heart right now that he will not concede and just carry on with your day without worrying about it.
Yeah.
We don't need him to concede. In California,
it goes against his brand, and all
and they get to win.
Right. It goes against his brand, and all he cares about is his brand.
And conceding has nothing to do with anything. It's a formality that doesn't actually, it's not required for, you don't have to concede to lose an election. You can just be angry about it forever if you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
it's just a norm that he doesn't care about.
You can concede and still win, which happens all the time in California because they take forever to count the votes. And so once they've counted the votes 10 weeks later, suddenly someone who already conceded the election, weeks ago, ends up being the winner. And you know what? They still get to win. It doesn't matter if they conceded. No one's keeping track.
That's it.
In any case, his lack of composure in this moment has lent Twitter an exciting air of late, because he had a news conference where he was complaining about all of these injustices. That was one of his other appearances this week. So hashtag Diaper Don started trending.
Yeah.
I can't believe we didn't think of that before, by the way.
I know.
People of America. I don't know what's wrong with us. But then he got really mad that it was trending. And so he went on a rant about that, where he said, Twitter is sending out false trends that have absolutely nothing to do with what is really trending in the world. They make it up, and only negative stuff. The US, and only negative stuff.
Yeah.
He didn't specify that Diaper Don was what was trending, that was what was bothering him, but that was what was trending at the time.
Clearly it was. And the visual of this obviously was so ridiculous because he's sitting at that tiny desk.
It was the one where he was at the tiniest desk. Somebody
and he looked like a total.
And there's that,
right, I know. And there's that picture of him from the profile where you see his, dump truck ass, which is really, what spawned this in the first place. Besides the fact he was being a baby, because he did get into a tense, back and forth about election fraud, where he continued to spew some of this nonsense. So obviously that's what he was upset about. But then hilariously, he went on to saying, for purposes of national security, Section 230 must be immediately terminated, which is the part of a law from 1996, which protects websites from lawsuits over content posted by users. Right. And this is a thing that the Republicans have long been attacking, because they claim that this is a thing that is allowing all of these websites to have to be bent against conservative viewpoints, which anyone who has ever been on Twitter, or specifically YouTube, by the way, which is a dark, YouTube is
darkest corner of the
dark
internet
web at this point. It knows that is not what Section 230 is being used for.
No.
At
Section
all.
230 is a lot of conspiracy theorists
Right. I was going to say,
spouting bizarro nonsense.
right.
On
All of these social media platforms that he is attacking are what allowed him to come into power in the first place, really.
They're what
and
are
certainly
enabled.
they're what allowed Q to become a thing.
I mean,
unequivocally, like that was
for sure.
That's YouTube. I mean, it sort of started on Twitter, but like
I love that they perceive any of these internet companies as being biased against conservatives when their movement is so dependent on all of them.
It's so wild, right?
I mean, they love to be angry at anyone. So I guess in that sense,
it fits in with their overall narrative of the media being against them.
Right. And also it's part of this sort of same narrative that the deep state stuff is part of, where it's just like everyone is against us. We must be fearful all the time. To be fearful, we must be illogical lunatics. And because we are fearful, we must act in ways that defy any sense of fact or logic. And that is required of us because everyone is against us everywhere and there's no one we can trust, which is how cults also get you, you guys.
Hello.
If anyone ever tells you that literally everyone is out to get you, that person is asking you to join a cult. And listen, if you're curious, go ahead, because cults are fascinating, but do not give them any money.
No.
That's where you have to protect yourself.
But you can't be in one without doing so. That's how they.
That's the thing. You'll never make it into a cult if you're refusing to give money to any cults. So if someone asks you to join a cult, you can talk to them.
Catch-22 because you might want to do it for science.
That's
you can't.
So true. That's right.
Go broke.
That's right. But the best way to keep yourself out of a cult is to never give money to someone who tells you everyone's against you. And that might be the best way to keep yourself out of losing all your money to the Biden transition team as well. I would just as a rule, be careful where you donate your money.
Yeah.
Oftentimes there's places to donate it to that don't ask you to be afraid of anyone.
Yeah.
Or only be afraid of people that are actually scary, which is another good idea. In any case, let's talk about the Biden cabinet.
Right. My favorite, so he got asked about this because a lot of people were being like, oh, so we see what you're doing here. We're just like doing the third term of the Obama presidency. And he got asked about that in an interview, and his answer was something to the effect of, no, it's not just going to be the third Obama term because we're facing much different issues this time, which I thought was hilarious because like it didn't answer the question at all. It was just sort of like, no, but only because it's literally a different year.
Only because Obama didn't have a pandemic that had already killed 500,000 Americans.
It's going to be the exact same people.
Right.
But they're just going to be faced with different decisions to make.
That's right.
But they will probably make the exact same decisions that they would have been because you've known them all for decades and decades and decades, and they've been making the same bad decisions for all of those decades.
And these are the people whose decisions led us to the decisions we are currently making right now.
Right. That's it.
So everything led to this point thanks to their decisions.
Yes.
In any case, so he let us know who his nominee for Secretary of State was going to be, Antony Blinken. He's an Obama vet. He was the Deputy National Security Advisor and the Deputy Secretary of State under Obama. And he is a member of what is not affectionately, but maybe affectionately known as the Blob, the sort of foreign policy establishment in DC. So what that means for us is that we can probably just look forward to the same warmongery bullshit that we've been dealing with for years under both administrations, under administrations of every party. It's basically look, the sort of like consensus inside the Blob is that the US has to stay a dominant global power, that we should be willing to use military force to maintain that power. And Blinken is somebody who has at times been even more warmongery than Biden. You know, he was in favor of, it's hard to get there, but he found a way. He was in favor of armed intervention in Libya that we did that turned out not great. He's an Israel hawk of the highest order. He is somebody who thinks that we should, we give a lot of money to Israel as military aid, and he thinks that we should continue to do that even if Israel doesn't honor any international agreements, which is something Israel often does, and also is not a time that we should not be supporting rogue states, you guys. If they're not honoring international agreements, they're a rogue state. Like, deal with your life. Yeah. And then he's also somebody who would never criticizes the Israeli government, which is like, listen, in 1994, that was like a consensus position in all of Washington. Yeah. It is not anymore. so we don't have to pretend like it is. We can live in a world where we recognize that we can have a government that allows Israel to exist and also doesn't trample on the rights of every single person on their borders, while or at least doesn't pay for Israel to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's he's got some dated positions, is what I'm saying, because he also is sort of fond of a framing of the Russia situation that kind of can, is comparable to the Cold War framing, where, I think at the Aspen Security Forum, he made some comments that kind of, put that into perspective, where he basically has like a Cold War interpretation of what our current relationship with Russia is. And that is maybe a sign that we are going to go back to the framing of the world where everyone is just sort of like an ally or a rival, and we're in like a bunch of like, sort of standoffs with rogue states, which is not ideal. And so I think we can look forward to uses of military power that, I mean, to be fair, did not define the Trump era, but should not define our current era either.
Well, and that's the thing that I think, look, I am not even, don't take this at all in me sticking up for the Trump, foreign policy, because like, who even knows what it possibly was? I mean, the foreign policy was like writing love letters to Kim Jong-un. Like, that's not what I'm looking for. So don't take this the wrong way. But like, the reason that this is called the blob is because on so many levels, the Democrats and the Republicans in Washington all think generally the same thing on foreign policy, with like some exceptions and like just varying degrees of how warmongery you are going to be. Like, do you want to intervene in 100% of places, or do you want to intervene in like 98% of places?
Right. Do you want to try diplomacy before you intervene with your military, or do you want to just send the military straight over?
Right. But overall, everybody just like generally thinks the same thing, that like America should be like the, the leader, and like we should be, intervening everywhere and keeping the peace and doing all of those things. Right. That's why it's called the blob, because it's like literally what the entire, national security and foreign policy. Right, exactly. So on some level, having 4 years away from that was kind of nice isn't the word, because like what we got instead was lunacy, right? And I'm not looking for lunacy, but like the idea that we're now
reset, though.
Right, but the idea, exactly. But the idea that we are now returning to what we previously had should not give anyone any confidence about our future foreign policy. So like, if you're thinking like, oh, finally Tony Blinken, a career guy in foreign policy who really knows what's up with all of these foreign countries and has actually traveled places, like if you're thinking to yourself that like that's a good reason for like you to be happy about Tony Blinken as Secretary of State, you should check those feelings. That's all I'm saying.
Also, as we pointed out during our 2013 takedown of a potential Hillary Clinton candidacy, experience and good ideas are not the same thing.
Right.
A lot of the blob, there are a lot of career foreign policy experts in DC who don't have good ideas.
Right.
So the fact that they have experience instituting bad ideas does not make them better qualified to serve in situations where their bad ideas continue to compound problems that we already have.
Yes.
Than someone with good ideas.
Right. Having 30 years of experience coming up with the wrong answer is not what you're looking for.
Doesn't recommend anyone. No. Exactly. And that's a lot of this. And, it's been interesting because our focus for the last 4 years has also been mostly domestic, which means that a lot of the things that were driving us crazy in the Bush and Obama years kind of fell off the radar because it was so crazy at home that like, who could even know what was going on in Libya, or who could know what was going on? Who can possibly know what's going on in Syria ever? Like, so we sort of fell off of our former foreign policy focus, but keep in mind that this is where a huge amount of the resources that we accumulate as a country go. I mean, this is where all of our taxes go.
Right.
This is also policy that, I think the reason we were so focused on it before this is because foreign policy really does determine whether we are safe at home or not. The reason the reason 9/11 was this sort of startling moment for us was because it was the first time that we were like, oh, things that happen elsewhere impact us in a way that is direct and violent. And knowing that maybe should have had us come up with some better answers than going to war everywhere so that there could be even more angry people in the world who hate us. And it didn't seem to lead to that because that's not how the blob operates.
Right.
But this idea that we need to be some sort of like military superpower everywhere is something that I think is taken for granted in the entire DC establishment, Republican and Democratic. And I think it's a question that we're allowed to ask. Is that something we need to do? Is that something that we need to pursue in the way that we're pursuing it? Is there another way to be like a good partner to the rest of the world other than just like policing everyone and telling people that after we could barely throw together an election, telling them that they have to operate their governments in the way that we say? I mean, this is like not a time that I think that we can go around telling people that they should follow our model for anything.
Yeah.
So we have to, I think, be really firm with the incoming Biden administration about our lack of interest in continuing to send huge amounts of resources to unending wars that don't gain us anything.
Yeah.
What if we gained from going into Iraq? Dead people.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
In any case, we spoke last week about John Kerry coming on as the climate czar, I think.
Which is a new cabinet level position. So like, that's great, I guess.
Right. I think also he's somebody that, you know, we could probably work with on the left if we need to, but he'll be frustrating. Also, I would like him and like 1,000 other people to just be given the chance to have a relaxed retirement. I didn't mind John Kerry as Secretary of State. I didn't agree with everything he did, but I felt like he was a reasonable Secretary of State. I felt confident with him as the Secretary of State.
Yeah, right. He's a statesman.
He's a statesman. He should be given the opportunity to have a dignified retirement in which he does not have to continue while looking like he's melting.
I was going to say, go and take the time off and deal with your face melting disorder.
Exactly.
Like,
things can't be going that well with your face melting to the degree that it is.
No.
So, you know, it was nice that he joined Biden on the campaign trail back in Iowa where we saw him melting initially. But it's like, let's give this man some time to sleep. In any case, he recently had an op-ed that was entitled, or that was about how to better tackle climate change. And it was all free market solutions. And I think the thing that we have to worry about with him was that everything will be like a half-assed pro-market approach.
Yeah.
And some climate change stuff is not going to, some of the stuff we just have to stop doing. We can't appeal to the market to put the price, you know, make the price of carbon higher.
That's
or whatever.
what I need. These, you know, that's a very sort of like DLC Clinton style approach. Yes. But the problem with that approach is that it's now the year 2020.
That's right.
And those approaches have been actively not working for pushing 40 years now.
And a lot of the approaches that they never mention approaches that have not yet not worked because we've never gotten to try them. They only mention approaches that for like 40 years have been failing. And then they're just like, well, we got to do more of this. Yeah. It's like, I don't think that we have to do more about, you know, making carbon expensive.
Sure,
What we need to do is probably have a Green New Deal. But even if you're not going to have a Green New Deal, maybe at least think about literally like converting the grid and like shutting down power stations that rely on fossil fuels and things like that. Like there are infrastructure things that we can make active choices to do that are good for America, even if they're not good for business.
Right.
And saving the world should not be required to be good for business to happen. I mean, we're like in an actual crisis. Yeah. Like people are like living in environments that are no longer going to be hospitable to humans.
Yeah.
So like, it's time to like try a thing. We don't need to let the market tell us what our limits are. He also, you know, under Obama, he defended the expansion of fossil fuel production. And so he does have some skeletons in his closet. It seems unlikely that he'll be really tough on the companies that actually are causing the bulk of our environmental woes. And so you know, that's something that I think we're going to have to really stay on this administration about, because it should not, this is like what drives me nuts about the straw bans. It's like nice that we're all chipping in. Sure. Yep. I don't mind. But like, I don't need to be told I can't use straws while Starbucks is not asked to come up with a solution where I don't need straws. That was a bad example because they literally did, and it just used more plastic because it was new sippy cups. Right. But I mean, like, consumers are not the people that are doing the primary, or not causing the conditions that the polluting is happening in. It's corporations that are causing the conditions. Yeah. You know, It's not individuals. It's the same way. It's like blaming individuals for going to their house, their family's house for Thanksgiving, instead of thinking, why didn't our policy prevent them from doing this? Like, you need to think bigger than just, should people use straws and plastic spoons? You should be thinking, who's manufacturing those? What, is there another material that we can manufacture these things out of, so that people don't have to make the choice to use plastic or not plastic, so that people don't have to carry coffee mugs with them around when they obviously are not going to do that. So maybe we can just come up with a way for them to get coffee in a cup that's not bad for the environment. Like, these are corporate level decisions. These are big decisions. These are not decisions individuals need to make. So like, market solutions to these problems always rely on individuals being asked to make more expensive choices because they're quote unquote better for the environment. And that is like not how we actually solve the problem. We solve the problem. It's like the water problem in LA, or in California in general, where it's like, it's the agricultural industry that uses all the water. It's not people taking long showers. So like, telling everyone to take shorter showers is fine, but like, also make it possible for agricultural industries to use less water.
Yep.
That's left. In any case, Avril Haines, Director of National Intelligence, played a key role in overseeing the drone strike program over Obama. So she was the deputy CIA chief during the Obama years, and was involved in the drone program. At one point, she was involved with some initiative that was supposed to fix the drone program, but no one thought it worked.
Including
the ACLU didn't think it worked. Human Rights Watch didn't think it worked. And then she also was involved in some accountability process that basically like helps shield CIA officials from being punished for their involvement in torture. She supported Gina Haspel's nomination for CIA director, despite that controversy about her being in supervision of the torture program. That's not the return to the intelligence world that I'm looking for. No. I have a specific bone to pick with Alejandro Mayorkas,
I know you do, and I love it. Do it.
Appointee. So here's the thing. And this guy, look, of all of these people, he's probably the most promising. He's one of the original DACA architects. And people in general have been feeling okay. Pramila Jayapal, tweeted that she was excited about him. But every single person, including people on the left who have been lauding him and talking about how wonderful he is, have cited primarily, that he was an architect of DACA, and then that he's an immigrant himself. And being the DACA thing, absolutely. Good work to everyone. He's a Cuban immigrant, though. And there's one thing that I know as someone who, studied Cuban politics in college / went on a bunch of solidarity brigades to Cuba, because here's my life, is that Cubans in America have a special protected immigration status, which means that they don't go through the traditional immigration process to be considered immigrants or refugees here. They are sort of given a blanket status when they arrive. So like, random Cubans who arrive by raft are greeted with open arms by the American immigration community, in a way that, like, if you are like a random Salvadorian who arrives via raft, you are promptly put back on that raft, probably, or / imprisoned. Like, you are not given an opportunity.
Your child put in a cage.
You're put your like life is ruined. Cubans do not go through that process. So anytime that somebody is specifically praised for their understanding of the immigrant experience because they are a Cuban immigrant, a red flag goes up, in my opinion, or in my head. In my head, because I feel like this is somebody that the one thing we know about him, his immigration experience, is that it has nothing to do with the experiences of the kind of people who are most at risk under our current immigration system and are being mistreated most broadly. He is not someone who understands that process. He may, as somebody who has worked in the field, but his personal experience as a Cuban immigrant does not give him insight into that process. And so that can't be why he's qualified to do this job. He can be qualified to do this job for many other reasons, but being a Cuban immigrant does not give you any special qualification to oversee an immigration program. And also, because of their protected status, Cuban immigrants are like famously like kind of shitty on immigration. Like, just as that is a community that's famously quite conservative as voters.
Well, I was going to say, it was that was the community that people were sort of like, at least people who sort of were uneducated on the issue were surprised that like broke so hard for Trump in Florida. But that shouldn't have been so surprising.
Famous Republican voting bloc.
Yeah.
It's like any of the ex-communist immigrant groups are Vietnamese people, famously Republican voting bloc. A lot of certain sectors of the Russian immigrant community. Like, these are like not shocking situations, you guys. But in any case, I feel like when we lean really hard on identity politics signifiers and don't also check into people's records, and this guy is a creature of Washington, so he has a record to check into.
Yeah, totally. Because
It
there's
kind
been
of
an, yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
it's frustrating to me when he's being given credibility on a basis that actually is like the opposite of credibility.
Yeah.
Like it is not a just and humane immigration program does not start with the personal experiences of a Cuban immigrant.
Yeah. Well,
in any case, he was he served at DHS under Obama. That's why he's in this position. But there was an inspector general report that he had been intervening to help like rich people, producers from Hollywood, like Vegas casino owners, Terry McAuliffe, oddly, get around immigration rules. And that the report said that he explicitly prioritized, quote, people with money, and bullied anyone on his staff who questioned that decision. So, and that to me kind of sums up what I always find frustrating about the sort of at least stereotypical Cuban position on immigration, is that it is very much about the fact that some people deserve immigration status and others don't.
Yeah, agreed.
Because obviously if you're a person who has a special status, you want to believe you deserved it. I mean, right. I get it, but like that, in any case. So I'm frustrated that people keep referencing that as a specific reason that we should love him, because I'm like highly suspicious.
Yeah.
But here we are. Now, Treasury Secretary.
Right. And this is the most,
Janet
at least
Yellen.
to me, this is the most interesting one, because it's going to be Janet Yellen. You'll remember her from being the Fed chair.
Right.
So she's also been around for quite a long time. She's going to be the first woman to head the Treasury. So that's, sort of exciting. And this has been a little polarizing, at least on the far left. I think generally, again, she is probably like being praised because she is the first woman. And she also, I think at least in terms of coronavirus, has most recently sort of like talked about like how she understands that there needs to be, quote, extraordinary fiscal support during the pandemic. So a lot of people are sort of like, okay, she's a person who understands fiscal, how our monetary policy works, and like how the government is going to need to pump money into the economy to like fix where we're at. And like people generally feel good about that, as do even I feel good about that, because she's correct, right? And that is sort of like the most pressing, monetary issue facing the country right now. So like, great. However, even Elizabeth Warren, Elizabeth Warren, I hope this, not just for Elizabeth Warren herself, but for all members of the left who think that if you play nice, you will get something. I mean, Elizabeth Warren sold out Bernie Sanders untold times, didn't endorse him in the primary, which is like fine, but then has apparently, we've talked about on this podcast before, like that she has basically herself been on the phone with the Biden campaign every day, like literally helping them craft like their entire policy platform, which didn't exist prior to them winning the primary, because they literally didn't have
the
one.
Nicest.
Right. And that, God bless her soul, she's not even going to get a fucking parking pass.
Yeah.
Right? Because she wanted Treasury Secretary. And I understand it was going to be hard to give somebody from the Senate, especially the way the Senate elections went and like this and that. There's a Republican governor there. I get it. Okay. But like the fact that she wanted it and she didn't get it when no one of those primary competitors, I would say even probably Kamala Harris, who got the Veep, played, as you said, nicer. Like she's just going to go back to the Senate as is. And I'm fine with that because like she's a great senator. But like, this is take note here if you're on the left.
I think this is not even just an issue with the left. This is an issue with the center as well, because Obama got on the phone and threatened all those people, and he made promises to them, and I don't see a single one of their names on this list.
Well, we're going to get them, I think, probably.
We're not going to get any of the senators, though. We're not going to get any of the
none of the senators.
Qualified. We're going to get Pete fucking Buttigieg in some lame position, but he's not going to get something impressive.
No,
because he has no qualifications. He can't, Right.
But
they had everyone else drop out. They had Amy Klobuchar drop out. She is not going to get anything. They had, Liz Warren drop out. She's not going to get anything. Bernie Sanders is going to be treated like shit because he always is. Like all of these competitors who gave Biden huge, who excited electorates that were not excited about Biden and then basically fucking handed them to him are going to get nothing. And I know that promises were made to them because they all dropped out at once.
I'm sure they were.
I mean, no one made a promise to Sanders, obviously, because no one ever wants to. But all these other people, promises were made, and I don't see any promises being delivered yet. So I'm curious about that anyway.
Yeah. I think some of them, you're right. I don't think anybody in the Senate.
I think Obama did some of them dirty. Certainly Warren, but I think he did dirty. He probably did clothes dirty.
Yeah.
I think there's probably a number of them that were done dirty by Obama.
But anyway, like even, I love it. This article says, her appointment has excited Democratic economists, including Lawrence Summers and Paul Krugman. And I'm like,
Larry Summers is fucking Democratic. Get over yourselves.
That's who we're considering. Like, fuck Larry Summers. I mean, like, hard. Like, never be seen.
Straight out of here.
Anyway, but even, Doug Henwood, who's a socialist economist, said that Biden could have done worse than Yellen. And the reason that he said that was because of what she said about this extraordinary fiscal support during the pandemic. But there has also been some, debate on the left as to whether, other than in regards specifically to the pandemic, is she actually potentially an advocate of austerity policies?
Well, the answer is yes.
And the answer is yes, because she's basically said so with her own mouth.
That's right. Using words out of her head. That was how we found out.
She is currently on the board of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, which is an organization that's taken some heat from the left because of its stance on austerity. Their Twitter handle is literally @BudgetHawks, by the way.
None of that.
So, there have been progressive activists, people who worked on the Sanders campaign, who tweeted this week, it's critical that Yellen ceases to interact with anyone from @BudgetHawks, because like we are not living in a world right now where worrying about the national debt is a thing that anybody should be doing. Certainly not anybody at the Fed or Treasury.
Well, and she's someone who famously loves to worry about the national debt because it's something that she's done for a decade.
Yeah.
Worrying about the rising debt is one of her things that she does.
Right. She talks about how it's unsustainable. She talks about that against, whatever the GDP is. I mean, this is a thing that she loves to talk about. And none of the things, she said in 2010, she said a high and rising level of government debt relative to national income is likely to eventually put upward pressure on interest rates, thereby restraining capital formation, productivity and economic growth. And that has not been what's happened because the level of government debt continues to rise astronomically. Even Trump's tax cut which was not a good use of debt, has not resulted in any of the things that she's talking about on higher interest rates.
Experience and good ideas are not the same thing.
Right, exactly. So, and she of all people should know that because she ran the Fed and they just get to make up whatever the fuck interest rates they want to make up anyway. So like, what was she even talking about? So anyway. Nonsense. I get that there's varying points of view on Janet Yellen. So maybe let's see how it pans out and not go
into we have because we have no choice.
Well, we have no choice. But like maybe she's not one to like fully go into a rage over Like I'd rather go into a rage over Tony Blinken, I think, potentially.
I have a suspicion that with her we have a little time to buy.
We do.
Because I think she will be okay with emergency spending for pandemic related reasons.
Yes.
And then when we have to quote, pay that money back, that's when we're going to have to be like, no, we don't.
Yeah.
And so we have like a year to plot that situation.
Right. And we
the
know
Blinken situation, we need to get in, get on the ground floor of that. Cause once we're at war, it's very hard to get out of wars, as we've learned from never ever getting out of a war that we've started. But we have a little time with Yellen if she's willing to buy us some debt, buy into some debt on the pandemic response front. And then later when she tries to pay it back, that's when we're like, hey, let's not worry about that.
Right. And that, unfortunately, the thing that does worry me about her is that those tendencies that she has to worry about the debt match up with Joe Biden himself's tendencies about the debt.
These fools are going to be desperate to delve deep into austerity politics within 18 months to 2 years.
Joe Biden loves to worry about the debt, loves a good grand bargain, loves to cut services.
If we can cut a service that is a guaranteed service that everyone loves and is incredibly popular, he will head straight into a bargain on that. And the bargain that he'll make will not be a good one. It'll be the kind where we lose something that we never gain back.
Yep.
And that is
Um,
how conservatism grows. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
welcome. In any case, so beyond all of this, so the transition team also has like a bunch of execs from horrible companies. It has some teachers union types, but I would contend that that is not an indication of anything other than that Biden absolutely should be and has to be better than Obama was on education, because his whole fucking calling card is his connection to educators.
Right.
Bill is the whole reason that you would even trust him to do anything. And so I feel like if he's not better than the charter school approach that the Obama administration was taking, if he doesn't know better than that, and because of that, he has a few teachers union people on his like that should he doesn't get a pat on the back for that from me. What he gets
I
is
agree.
yeah, this is the only thing that he is someone who should be able to handle. Everything else I don't trust him on. He should be able to handle putting some teachers unions on officials on his transition team. I mean, good Lord. And also, if Randy Weingarten is one of them, like we can all just take a step back right now. I know she's gunning for Secretary of Education. She's barely been in the classroom in her life. In any case, beyond all of this though, there are a lot of cabinet types that we should think a little bit about what they've been doing for the last 4 years, because one thing that a lot of these people are connected to is the shady world of DC consultants.
Yep.
This consulting firm phenomenon is actually like a fairly new thing. It is because there were ethics laws put into place to protect lobbyists from revolving door appointments. And so because of that, instead of being a lobbyist, everyone became a consultant. And as consultants, they don't have to disclose who they work for. They don't have to do any of the ethics disclosures that lobbyists have to do, nor do they really have to even announce that they've been consulting in the first place. Some of them have done some of that for the Biden transition team, but there are no rules in place protecting you from having consultants.
It's basically a way to skirt the existing lobbyist revolving door laws.
Ethics laws,
You become a consultant instead of a lobbyist, but they're doing the same thing.
Many of these schools are from the same few consulting firms. So like there's one called West Exec that was founded in 2017. So right after, the Obama administration ended. It was founded by Tony Blinken and Michelle Flournoy, who is the person that they're talking about for Secretary of Defense, that she's in the news a lot. And Avril Haines was a principal there. So a lot of these people that we just spoke about have been connected to it. Nobody knows about their client list, and they aren't required to disclose it. Like I said, they are sort of strategic consultants. So no one really even knows what the course of their work is. But one thing that we do know is that it is not a partisan enterprise. There are former Republican officials that are also among their principals, which means that they are working for organizations that would benefit from the consulting of former Republican officials, which says to me that they have some clients that maybe would be unsavory to be associated with in a Democratic administration. Basically, the rule is that as long as they don't directly advocate for federal dollars on behalf of their clients as lobbyists would, they don't have to divulge anything about what they're up to. So, as long as they're not specifically asking for, a specific piece of legislation that specifically addresses a need and are just talking in general terms about ideas, they don't have to tell anyone anything about what they're up to or who they're working for. So there's tons of former Democratic officials that are part of West Exec. I think they have 38 employees listed on their website. 21 of them donated to Biden. So it's a pretty heavily Democratic operation, but there are 5 West Exec staffers who are all Obama administration vets that are on leave from the firm to help set up Biden's review teams at various places, the Pentagon, the Treasury Department, the Council of Economic Advisors, agencies like that. There's 2 West Exec principals who were briefed last week on national security. So there's 2 that are sort of like close advisors to Biden. Bob Work, who was the Deputy Secretary of Defense under Obama and remained for a little bit into the Trump administration. And then David Cohen, who was the former Deputy Director of the CIA and the Treasury Department at various times. And he is sort of in the running for a top post with the Biden administration. So they're getting briefed as people that are still working in the consulting world. There is Jem Psaki, who was the communications director under Obama, or one of them worked at West Exec, but she's now on advising Biden's transition team. There are a bunch of them that are considered potential hires from West Exec. And the firm even negotiated a clause in its office space contract that states that it can break the lease if people are called back into public service. So they were serving, they kind of, I think, saw themselves as like a government in waiting, essentially. And there are a bunch of firms that do this, including.
And I love that those firms say that they're consulting for, quote, private sector diplomacy.
Yes.
That's my favorite terminology of all, because like that is the literal definition of lobbying, but you're just not technically calling it lobbying.
It's
so good. Private sector diplomacy. That's, I mean, I got to give it to them.
They're consultants. They came up with a great word. That's what consultants do, is they do nothing and then they call it something crazy.
Yeah.
There's one that Madeleine Albright.
What can we call lobbying that's not lobbying?
Right.
Private sector diplomacy. We got it.
And that makes it sound also like the terminology of that makes it sound like corporations are their own governments, which is even more troubling to me.
It totally does.
I mean, it's totally so like you don't need to do diplomacy with a domestic company that is governed by your government.
No, you don't.
Be up to that. So in any case, and then there's commercial diplomacy. Some of them call themselves commercial diplomacy firms, like what is it? It's Albright Stonebridge, which is Madeleine Albright's firm.
Yeah.
The agency review teams that Biden's put together also include some alums from there. And there's a few like McLarty Associates. There are a few people that are either in the running there or informally advising Biden's team, and they have definitively done work for Chevron and Walmart. And so that is literally just a revolving door situation. And look, I get that people have to work, and that when a new administration comes in, whole administrations worth of people lose their jobs. And then what do? They turn around and think, how can I use this to my advantage? But this is some shady fucking shit. Consulting is a thing that can mean a lot of things, obviously. Yeah. But this particular brand of consulting is just secret lobbying. It is not a different thing than lobbying. It is not, just because they are not directly asking for specific dollars to go towards specific policy does not mean that they are not able to make that point. Yeah. So what they are doing is indirect direct lobbying. Yeah. And that means that we should be able to know who they worked for, because the whole point of these laws was that you have to disclose who you're working for so that we know if there's a conflict of interest. And these people, some of them have disclosed who they most recently were working for to the Biden team, but not because they had to. But none of them have had to disclose older clients, including clients they had significant relationships with early on. Yeah. And none of them have had to disclose what they're up to with these clients. Yeah. Even worse, because consulting can mean anything. I work as a consultant. It means whatever. It's what I call myself when I'm not sure what my title is at a place that I'm doing freelance work for. Anything can be consulting.
Yeah, but you do actually do consulting.
But I do actually do consulting. But I don't do this kind of expensive. These people want to hire me.
I know. After we read this article earlier in the week. Yeah, I sent this article to Lila earlier this week, and she was like, "Are we just supposed to start a consulting firm?" And I was like, "Probably."
I think we should. These people must be making a lot of money. We could be making a lot of money. We deserve a lot of money. Yeah, we know stuff. In any case,
we do.
Politico asked Flor and I in a recent interview to discuss how West Exec might be what their relationship to the Biden administration might be. And all she would say is that it's not a purely Democratic outfit. So that's not great.
Well, neither is the Biden administration.
Neither is the Biden administration. So I guess we have that.
It's a match made in heaven.
Luckily, we can also be concerned about her for many reasons, because she's super cozy with a bunch of like defense industry people. Well, so we can be worried about her whether or not she's part of West Exec. Yeah. On to some good news.
Right. This is perhaps my favorite story of the week, actually, because this made me
the sinkhole was my favorite story.
Oh yeah, sure. This is one of the similar to after I really felt vindicated after who's our mayor?
Garcetti.
Eric Garcetti. Ooh, boy, it's been a long week, guys. After Eric Garcetti finally endorsed Jackie Lacey.
Right.
After I had to send his office multiple emails and calls and get redirected to my council person and God knows what else. I really felt vindicated by that. It's so great when you get to partake in some sort of protest type movement or
Right.
like phone call to your
That
congressperson that
works.
actually results in something, it really feels great, which is why I would contend that everyone should do it, because also the more people that do it, the more it's going to work.
That's right. So
But
here's
then
what we
you will also feel good about yourself. And
yeah.
all of those things happen. I sent a completely deranged email to Dianne Feinstein that probably
Right.
she may have sent along to the FBI. I don't know what she did with it.
I
It
have
was
left her
questionable. I did it in a rage and
deranged messages. I have berated multiple of her staffers. Well, I learned a new strategy in calling her office where, because I feel bad, the staffers aren't her. They don't want to deal
no.
with this. So I'm always really polite to them and I keep a calm tone. But then I just tell them, Senator Feinstein is a disgrace. She should resign from office immediately. Like I say stuff like that, but just in a really calm tone.
Oh, I
And
like that.
I think they appreciate it. They're always very friendly to me when I do that.
Oh, nice.
In any case,
Good.
we did it, you guys. Dianne
Great.
Feinstein is going to step down as the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Hugging Lindsey Graham does not pay.
Right. And specifically because of this. Like, this is why she's doing it. Because the blowback was so intense. Even Chuck Schumer, after the fact, was like, I had a very serious conversation with Dianne Feinstein. So, like, it was because liberal groups, even some not so liberal groups, even some of her own Democratic colleagues in the Senate were like, look, this is not the way we're trying to act.
Not it.
During the Trump administration. Like, sorry, but we have all collectively decided that the way that you used to do business is not how we're doing business more. And look, I realize for someone who's like 117, that probably is sad for her. She has been used to her job for 70 years or however long she's been in the Senate. And she knows the way that it has always been, and it is sad for her, and really for a lot of people to a certain degree, that is not the way the Senate functions any longer. But she has been literally the last of the 100 of them to find out, right? Yeah. Like and it really just happened now, apparently. And I think only through like literally leadership telling her that she had to go. Yeah. So, we did it. This is what collective action can get you. And maybe it feels like a small victory, but you got to
step down from a minority leadership position in the Senate Judiciary Committee so that it can go on to Dick Durbin or Sheldon Whitehouse, probably.
I mean, look.
My mom and I have been working on a crazy theory for this one.
Oh.
That the person that it should go to, and this is going to sound wacky because it's not someone I approve of, but you know how much I love to make suggestions for people I don't
I think I know who you're going to say, and I think I like it.
Is Clobes.
I knew you were going to say Amy Klobuchar. I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah. She's fucking scary, which is what you're looking for.
Yep.
And she has a lot to prove because she has some questionable background decisions on, when it comes to justice, if you will.
Yep.
But she is what I want is somebody who has an incentive to go out and actually do something on that committee and not just be like hugging Lindsey Graham all day.
She's great in those committees.
She's great in those committees.
It's the one time I feel really good about Amy Klobuchar.
Yes. That's where she became a star, everybody. Yeah. It was in the Kavanaugh hearings, and it's because she's a great questioner and she's good in that committee. And also, she would be less snoozy than some of these other fools.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think I always resent it when people suggest that all of my political strategy arguments are partisan in the sense of hating most of the center of the party, because they're really not. There are like people who are centrist that I feel like could be used to their advantage in ways that they're not being, like how I always said about Tammy Duckworth, how she'd be a great running mate for a more progressive candidate. I feel like Clobes is the perfect example of a person I don't approve of at all, but should definitely be the next head of the Judiciary Committee.
Yeah.
Or the next ranking member of the Judiciary Committee. Whatever's going to happen.
Well, we'll find out whether they're going to be the ranking member or the chair or whatever, based on the 2 Senate races in Georgia, which is what we're going to talk about next.
That's right. Well, first, before we get into this, can we talk about that Ossoff, that Ossoff TikTok from Thanksgiving?
Girl,
you guys
talking about like the most boring white shit ever. Like literally, like having a lengthy discussion with his wife about muesli,
where he mansplains how to say it to her. I mean, I
hate that guy.
Do not be releasing videos on the internets if that is your personality. Just don't appear anywhere. Just like let Warnock go out and be the charming person that he is a pastor, so he knows how to talk to humans.
Yeah.
Because that is his job.
Yep.
He's a good speaker. He has all the things. Do not be John Ossoff and then thinking that you should raise your head even 1 inch above the shoreline to be noticed when all that you, I mean, remember, there is a reason his hometown newspaper wouldn't endorse him because he was too boring.
Yes.
I mean, you remember
that's real, by the way. That's a real story, by the way, if you're new to this podcast.
His hometown newspaper would not endorse him, and they said it was because he was too boring. And this was the epitome of how to be actively boring. Brent and I have had discussions about active versus passive boringness at times in the past. And I often, like, passive boringness is like, okay, well, that happens sometimes to everyone. But what really gets my goat is when people are like actively boring, like they are making active choices that make them more boring somehow, or like people are doing things that actively increase my boredom in a way that is not just like a natural increase. Like that is what I like. I feel like as that video was going, I just got increasingly bored to the extent that I was almost amused by my own boredom by the end because it was so outrageous. In any case.
So bad.
Someone needs to talk to his campaign about not featuring him in any of the ads.
And this story, this is a real, I went through all of the human emotions, I think, in this story, because it's a story about the fact that the Georgia Democrats who are running for Senate are going to go back to having a door knocking operation. And my emotions are all over the place because obviously this is a good thing. Like and also it makes me feel good because it's like, oh, they took a note. Like I think
which so rarely happens in Democratic politics.
Which so rarely happens. Like I think that one of the big takeaways, and thanks for AOC for pointing this out, by the way, was that the Democrats chose to not do any door knocking. And like, look, I get it, you know, like you have to sort of like give them some sort of credit for like not going and banging on people's doors in the middle of a global pandemic, but also you can do that safely, and the Republicans were doing it. So like you basically just like ceded that to them and like chose to do it, and we're actively like, yes, go knock doors while we stay in our basement, right?
In places where people did it, we increased turnout by huge amounts.
Yeah, so and also in places where, and we also saw it help in places that like helped Joe Biden, you know? I mean,
exactly.
Like Rashida Tlaib did it in her district, which is in Detroit, which we know was the thing that really, you know, it was high turnout that helped deliver that to him. I'm not giving, you know, Michigan to Biden entirely on the shoulders of Rashida Tlaib, but like there are multiple examples of across the country where
like local candidates organized
really
door knocking operations
decided to do it,
delivered for Biden,
or at least turnout that probably wouldn't have been there otherwise. And we know that we've talked millions of times on this podcast. We've talked about it every day since the election. We've talked about it a million days before the election, that it's these types of operations that also really help, you know, having a more robust, or having any door knocking would have helped in the places in Texas where Biden got routed. They would have helped him do even better, probably in Arizona. They would have helped in certain parts of
and they would have helped some congressional and Senate candidates as well.
I think you have to look at the choice to not do any door knocking as in part why we did so terribly in both the House and the Senate races. So it heartened me to see that they were choosing to do it in here. But some of the quotes about why they are deciding to do this really just made me want to chuck my computer across the screen. Because like the Democrats are like, well, we've recognized that, you know, it's going to be turning out our base is going to be the most important thing, as opposed to persuading undecided voters on getting them to the poll. And the rage that reading that gave to me after this entire election, where we went around trying to like find like the one like undecided snowflake in the entire population of the United States. Like that's what Joe Biden's campaign was about. It was like trying to find like one Republican to flip.
Reagan Republicans who were interested in leaving the party.
Right. And now, after the election is over, it's like, oh, well, we understand we have to get our base out to vote in these elections. And I just want to flip my table over. Yeah. Because of course it is. You idiots.
Well, and the other thing that I think is always a misunderstanding in these kinds of states is the Democrats in Georgia are not less democratic than Democrats in blue states. They just live in Georgia. Like
Right.
It's not like your base is still Democrats everywhere. So you have to be willing to go talk to Democrats. It's not like your base in Georgia, because Georgia leans more towards the middle, that the Democrats in Georgia are somehow also Republicans.
Yeah.
Like they always act like in swing states and swing districts that the Democrats that are there are more conservative than the Democrats in other places.
Yeah, no, they're not.
And that's why it's okay to campaign as a Republican, but they are not. The Democrats in Georgia are Democrats.
Right.
They're not Republicans.
Yeah.
So like getting your base out requires appealing to Democrats,
And
which is just like appealing to Democrats everywhere.
Right. And the way that you have to appeal to them,
especially policy.
Is to talk policy, but it's definitely to knock on their doors, especially if your plan prior to knocking on doors is to have a lengthy discussion with your wife about muesli.
I mean, somebody has to get out there in front of Ossoff so he doesn't have to get out there himself. That's
oh God. So I'm glad they are doing this. I'm glad they took the note. But the fact that they're like just now seem to understand that we are having a base election when the election is already over, guys.
Right.
Is
it's like
maddening.
Stop yourselves immediately. I mean, just immediately.
So anyway, I think they both have better chances now. They're doing this.
Agreed. I mean, thank God thank God Warnock is in there with them.
Yeah.
Because John Ossoff is a person who could not pull this off himself.
No.
And with giving his best effort.
But with all due respect, no, I think that you're absolutely right, because his best effort actually lost, because he was actually one who was in a head-to-head race.
Exactly.
Neither of them got to 50%.
He is a person who is rematching in a race that he already lost.
Right. But considering the fact that he did do this well and that Biden won the state and nobody knocked on a single door, makes me think that potentially he could win, because it also makes me think that if they had knocked on a door in the first place, then he might have gotten 50%.
Right. It also then makes me think that a bunch of people went and cast votes for Biden and then did not vote for John Ossoff.
Well, they 100% did that because Ossoff lost by like 100,000 votes and Biden won by like 13,000.
Makes me think that this is someone who had even less appeal than Joe Biden. Which it's not a great situation to find yourself in.
No, it isn't.
I mean, at least Warnock's race was like a 10-way race. So like that was lunacy. But like
and he won by quite a bit, actually.
He won by 10 points, but he only won with 34% of the vote, but it was split between a zillion.
Yeah, and there were other Democrats running in that race.
There were other Democrats in the race, exactly. But I mean, John Ossoff is a person who was less appealing than a shadow of a candidate, a person who did not leave his basement at any point during this campaign.
Yeah.
So that's not great news.
No.
In any case, here's some not shocking news before we get to the most shocking news. Our final story is the most shocking news. The second final story is the least shocking news, which is that Trump pardoned Michael Flynn.
Right.
Because all he's going to do right now is try to appoint judges and pardon people.
Right. I was going to say, if you are a person who like got upset about that Michael Flynn pardon,
like check yourself. You don't have time for this.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, like, sure. I mean, like, get righteous about it.
Fair?
Like, if that's a thing that you want to waste your time with. But like, if you are committing to getting upset about all of the pardons that are coming between now and January, then I got to tell you, you're gonna be a crazy person by the time January rolls around.
Don't even this is not.
This is the beginning.
The president should not have this power. I think we've realized, and this is maybe a good time to think about that.
Yeah.
But with that said, don't worry yourself about who is and is not being pardoned by Donald Trump right now.
No, because it's going to be everyone.
It's everyone. They all did something wrong. We know it. They know it. Everyone knows it. It's too bad that no one ever seems to pay a price for anything with these people. But that's true of the Democrats too. So what are you going to do? And just leave yourself room to be shocked and appalled by things that are truly shocking and appalling. That we predicted would happen months ago. Don't let yourself be shocked by anything that we already know is happening. Here's a thing that you can be shocked by. I wouldn't be appalled by it because it's amazing. That happened in Taiwan. That is probably the most important news story of the week, possibly the year. There was a literal fist fight on the floor of their parliament in which people threw pig guts at each other. Pig guts. About a policy that would allow imports of U.S. pork and beef.
Yeah.
On the floor of their parliament, and there is video.
Which then led to fistfights. They wrestled.
I mean, the video is amazing.
It's
I
so
highly
good.
I mean, people are wearing raincoats, so some people, well, somebody brought pig guts.
Well,
to the
right.
floor of the
One of the parties did it specifically to not have someone come and give a speech about it. They're basically doing it
Right.
like this is
They're filibustering.
they're right.
They filibustered with pig
Yeah,
guts.
that's what they did. Yeah.
But if you are a person who has not yet seen this video, I mean, get yourself to a computer immediately, because it is actually what's promised. When my dad told me that there was a pig guts fight that broke out on the floor of the Taiwanese parliament, I thought to myself, he's exaggerating. What happened was they got into a scuffle and one small pig gut somehow got thrown.
No.
But that is not what happened. There are buckets of pig guts involved. It is pig gut central over there. And that means somebody was in charge of accumulating buckets full of pig guts, bringing them to the floor of the parliament, putting a raincoat on, and then just throwing them. People are slipping on the pig guts. They're falling down. I mean, everything is happening.
Yeah, it's good.
So it's possibly the greatest video that's ever been taken by humans. Certainly the best of 2020. And this has been a year of horror shows. So this is really the best that we have to offer, I think, at this point. But it's like this issue, like the Nationalist Party there has kind of seized this issue, even though it really wouldn't account for very much of the pork imports there anyway, or the pork consumption there. So it's an issue that has been kind of become like a proxy war, and now has become the greatest 2 minutes of television.
It's good.
So in any case, that's the news this week. Next week, we won't have anything this exciting to report, but we'll try.
We'll do our best.
We'll talk to you then.
Bye.
Bye.